In a packed courtroom, a judge orders a silent tomb keeper to remove her medal, calling it a cheap decoration. He was about to hold her in contempt, not knowing he was disrespecting a national hero in front of everyone. The morning air inside the Arlington County Courthouse was thick with the scent of stale coffee, damp raincoats, and quiet desperation. It was a symphony of the mundane, a place where life's minor frustrations came to be processed with bureaucratic indifference. Lawyers checked their phones, defendants stared at the floor, and clerks spoke in monotones that betrayed a long-practiced detachment. The fluorescent lights hummed, casting a pale, unflattering glow on the procession of traffic violations, noise complaints, and petty disputes that defined the day. Into this sea of weary normalcy walked Sergeant Maya Vance. She didn't stride or march, she simply appeared, moving with a silent, deliberate grace that seemed to bend the very air around her. The low chatter in the hallway outside courtroom 4B faltered and died. People turned, their conversations forgotten. She was dressed in the immaculate, iconic uniform of a tomb sentinel from the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, a dark blue Army service uniform jacket pressed to a razor's edge, white shirt and black tie perfectly knotted, and trousers with a crease so sharp it looked like it could cut glass. Her black leather shoes were polished to a mirror shine, making no sound on the scuffed linoleum tiles. Her presence alone was enough to command attention, a stark, disciplined figure in a room built on compromise and chaos. But it wasn't just the uniform that held every gaze. Pinned precisely above the service ribbons on her left breast was a medal that seemed to absorb all the light in the room. It was a bronze cross, suspended from a light blue ribbon dotted with 13 white stars. It wasn't large or ostentatious, but it possessed a gravity that was palpable, an aura of profound significance that even those who didn't recognize it could feel. The Distinguished Service Cross. Maya approached the clerk's desk, her expression as serene and unreadable as a marble statue. The clerk, a middle-aged woman named Maria Flores, looked up from her paperwork, her eyes widening slightly. "Can I help you, Sergeant?" she asked, her voice a notch softer than it had been with the man before her. "The military liaison office is on the 3rd floor. My name is on the register," Maya said. Her voice was low and steady, carrying a quiet authority that needed no volume. "For a traffic matter." Maria blinked. "Traffic?" She glanced from the formidable uniform to the legendary medal and back again. The two concepts refused to connect in her mind. A tomb sentinel, a hero decorated with one of the nation's highest honors for valor, summoned for a traffic ticket. It felt like a category error, a glitch in the universe. Maya simply nodded once, her gaze calm and direct. Protocol, however, was protocol. Maria fumbled with her keyboard, her fingers suddenly clumsy. She found the name, Vance, Maya. Citation number 734. Failure to comply with a posted no parking sign. The location was listed as a service road adjacent to Arlington National Cemetery. It was the kind of minor infraction that was usually handled with a quick fine and a dismissive wave. But nothing about this felt minor. An uneasy silence settled over the front of the courtroom as Maria handed Maya the summons slip back, a strange sense of reverence and confusion warring on her face. Just then, the courtroom door swung open and Magistrate Kevin Evans entered. In his mid-30s, with a sharp suit under his black robes and hair slicked back with an aggressive amount of gel, Evans was a man in a hurry. Recently appointed, he was known for his rigid efficiency and a conspicuous lack of the patience that comes with experience. He saw the law in black and white and his courtroom as a machine for processing dockets, not a stage for human drama. He took his seat, adjusted his papers, and began calling names, his voice crisp and impatient. "Vance, Maya." Sergeant Vance rose and moved to the defendant's stand. She stood with her hands folded neatly behind her back, spine perfectly straight, a posture of disciplined stillness. But before she could even state her name for the record, Magistrate Evans held up a hand, his eyes fixed on the medal on her chest. "You can remove that, Sergeant," he said, his tone brisk and dismissive. "This is a civilian court, not a parade ground." We don't allow the display of military decorations or any other symbols meant to influence the proceedings." A ripple of discomfort went through the few people paying attention. Maya Vance didn't move. "I said, remove it," Evans repeated, his voice louder now, laced with irritation. Maya's gaze remained steady. "Sir," she replied, her voice still quiet but unyielding. "It is part of my issued uniform." Magistrate Evans leaned back in his chair, a frown deepening on his face. He interpreted Maya's calm response not as a statement of fact, but as a challenge to his authority. In his world, rules were absolute, and his courtroom was his kingdom. "This court is not bound by your uniform regulations, Sergeant," he retorted, his voice sharp. "You will comply with my order, or I will hold you in contempt. Is that clear?" Still, Maya Vance stood motionless. She wasn't being defiant in the way he understood it. There was no anger in her eyes, no hint of rebellion. It was a deeper, more profound stillness, like a mountain absorbing a storm. It was the quiet resistance of an object that had faced forces far greater than a young judge's temper and had not yielded. The air in the courtroom grew thick with tension. A bailiff near the door shifted his weight, his hand instinctively moving closer to his sidearm. 3 weeks earlier, the sky over Arlington National Cemetery had been a somber, steel-gray canvas. A funeral for a 4-star general was underway, a solemn affair of muffled drums, crisp commands, and the heartbreakingly slow procession of a horse-drawn caisson. The air was heavy with grief and reverence. Sergeant Maya Vance had just completed her 24-hour shift guarding the tomb of the unknowns. It was a sacred, grueling duty she had requested, a way to honor those who never came home. She was walking toward the service gate where she had parked her motorcycle, a heavy, dark green machine she'd rebuilt herself. As she passed a section of the perimeter road, she saw a tour group of Gold Star families who had lost a loved one in service. Suddenly, a young boy, no older than 8, overwhelmed by the ceremony's sorrow, broke away from his mother's grasp. He ran, tears streaming down his face, blindly heading toward a narrow access lane. At that exact moment, a black sedan, part of an incoming diplomatic convoy, was turning into that same lane. The driver, distracted by his GPS, hadn't seen the small, darting figure. Maya saw it all in a fraction of a second, the blur of the boy's blue jacket, the silent approach of the car, the mother's horrified gasp. There was no time to shout. In one fluid, explosive motion, she sprinted to her motorcycle, kicked it into gear, and gunned the engine. She didn't try to get between the car and the boy. Instead, she executed a perfect, controlled skid, laying the heavy bike down on the asphalt. The motorcycle, a 700-pound barrier of steel and chrome, slid directly into the path of the sedan, screeching to a halt just inches from the boy's feet. The car's bumper crunched into the bike's engine block with a sickening thud. Chaos erupted. Secret Service agents swarmed the area. The boy's mother scooped him up, sobbing with relief. Maya, ignoring the scrapes on her own hands and the ruin of her beloved motorcycle, simply checked that the boy was unharmed, gave a curt nod to the frantic mother, and then focused on the new problem. Her damaged bike was now blocking a critical access route for the funeral procession. Working with a cemetery groundskeeper, she managed to drag the mangled motorcycle into a nearby grassy area, a spot temporarily designated as a no-parking zone due to underground utility work. It was the only place to move it without disrupting the solemn ceremony. Her actions were captured by a newly installed, automated security camera. The system, devoid of context or compassion, registered only one thing: a vehicle parked in a restricted zone. An electronic ticket was issued. A week later, a court summons arrived. Maya read it, folded it neatly, and prepared to answer the call, just as she answered every other duty, without complaint or explanation. Back in the courtroom, Magistrate Evans was losing his patience. "So, you admit you parked your vehicle in a restricted zone, yes?" "Yes, sir." "And you did not have permission to do so?" "There wasn't time to ask, sir." Evans scoffed. "And you believe your actions were above the law?" That this court's time is best spent admiring your medals instead of hearing an explanation. Maya paused, her gaze unwavering. I believe the situation required a response, she said, her voice low and measured. And I responded. Magistrate Evans saw only insolence. He was about to slam his gavel down when a subtle shift began in the courtroom, a current of awareness flowing just beneath the surface of the official proceedings. At her terminal, the court clerk, Maria Flores, had been typing quietly. The name Vance, coupled with the sight of that specific medal, had triggered a memory. It wasn't in the standard criminal database. It was somewhere else, in a file she'd accessed years ago during a special training on military protocols. A few keystrokes brought her to a restricted Department of Defense archive link. She clicked it. Her screen displayed a classified service record. Sergeant Maya Vance. Distinguished Service Cross. Below it was a citation, a narrative of such harrowing bravery that her breath caught in her throat. She didn't interrupt the judge, but she leaned over to the bailiff standing near the side door, a broad-shouldered man with a Marine Corps tattoo visible on his forearm, and whispered 4 urgent words. That's a DSC recipient. The bailiff, who had been watching the confrontation with growing unease, froze. His posture changed instantly, from relaxed readiness to ramrod-straight attention. His eyes, which had been on Maya, now darted toward the judge with a look of alarm. Magistrate Evans, oblivious to this undercurrent, pressed his attack. He pointed a finger at Maya, his face flushing with anger. Let me be absolutely clear, Sergeant. You are not on a military base. You are in a court of law. I don't care what unit you serve in or what piece of tin you have pinned to your chest. You will follow court decorum. He leaned forward, his voice rising. Remove the medal. That is your final warning. The bailiff took a hesitant step forward. Sir, he began, his voice quiet but firm, laced with a respect that was clearly not directed at the judge. Sir, that's the Distinguished Service Cross. The words landed with the force of a physical blow. A hush fell over the courtroom. Even those who had never heard of the Distinguished Service Cross understood from the bailiff's tone that this was something sacred. It was the way he said not a cross, but the cross. The nation's second highest award for valor, given for extraordinary heroism in combat. An honor so rare that entire divisions might go decades without seeing one awarded. Evans hesitated, his hand hovering over his gavel. What did you say? The bailiff cleared his throat, standing his ground. The DSC, sir. The Distinguished Service Cross. The murmuring in the gallery intensified. A war hero, someone whispered. My God, he's yelling at a war hero. But Evans, trapped by his own escalating rhetoric, doubled down. Pride and procedure blinded him. This is a civilian court, he snapped, his voice now cracking slightly. I don't care if she's wearing the crown jewels. She will comply, or she will be held in contempt. He turned to the bailiff. Constable, prepare to escort the sergeant to a holding cell if she refuses my next command. The bailiff didn't move. He simply looked at Maya with an expression of profound apology and respect. At her desk, Maria Flores knew she had to act. She stood up, her chair scraping loudly in the silent room. She typed a quick, frantic message on her terminal, sending it directly to the private inbox of the courthouse's chief supervising judge. The message was short, but it carried the weight of impending disaster. Judge Coleman, urgent attention required in 4B. A Distinguished Service Cross recipient is about to be arrested on your watch. Just as Magistrate Evans opened his mouth to issue the final, irrevocable order, the heavy oak door at the back of the courtroom swung open. A tall, silver-haired man in his late 60s entered. He wore the same black robes as Evans, but on him, they seemed to carry the weight of decades of wisdom, not just the authority of the office. This was Judge Marcus Coleman, a senior circuit judge and a retired Army colonel, known throughout the Virginia bar for his sharp legal mind and his unwavering integrity. He rarely, if ever, involved himself in the minor civil matters of the magistrate's court. His presence alone was enough to freeze the scene. Evans stared, his mouth agape. Judge Coleman's gaze swept the room, instantly taking in the tableau, the furious young magistrate, the defiant bailiff, the silent, decorated soldier, and the gallery of stunned onlookers. His eyes rested on Maya Vance and the bronze cross on her chest, and a look of immediate, profound recognition crossed his face. He walked forward with a calm, purposeful stride, his footsteps echoing in the silent room. He didn't address Evans directly. Instead, he approached the clerk's desk. "Maria," he said in a low, calm voice. "I'll be taking over this matter." He then turned to the bench. "Mr. Evans," he said, his tone formal but carrying an unmistakable command. "If you'll permit me. There appears to be some vital context missing from this proceeding." Evans, pale and flustered, could only nod. He gathered his papers and stepped away from the bench, a man suddenly aware that he had wandered into a minefield he didn't know existed. Judge Coleman took the seat, the worn leather sighing under his weight. He looked out over the courtroom, his eyes eventually settling on Maya. "I'd like the record to show," he began, his voice resonating with a quiet power that filled the room, "that I am assuming control of this hearing due to the special status of the defendant." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "Sergeant Maya Vance," he continued, speaking directly to the room, not reading from any notes. "Recipient of the Distinguished Service Cross, awarded for actions undertaken during Operation Enduring Freedom, Helmand Province, Afghanistan." The silence in the courtroom became absolute, reverent. "The official citation notes," Judge Coleman went on, his voice steady but filled with emotion, "that during an ambush on her platoon, an enemy grenade landed in the center of her fire team. Without hesitation, Sergeant Vance threw herself upon the grenade, absorbing the entirety of the blast with her own body to save the lives of the 4 soldiers beside her." A collective gasp went through the gallery. A woman put her hand to her mouth. The Marine veteran bailiff closed his eyes. "She underwent 17 surgeries," Coleman said, his voice dropping slightly. "She spent over a year at Walter Reed Medical Center. When the Army offered her a full medical retirement with full honors, she declined. She had only one request, to be allowed to continue to serve. She asked to be assigned to the old guard, so she could spend her days standing watch over the very heroes she sought to emulate." He let the story hang in the air for a moment before turning his gaze, now hard as steel, upon the disgraced Magistrate Evans. "So you see, Mr. Evans," he said, each word landing like a hammer blow. "That medal is not a decoration. It is not a piece of tin. It is a testament to a sacrifice you and I can barely comprehend. It is part of her uniform, yes. But more than that, it is part of her soul." He turned back to the clerk. "Dismiss the summons. With the court's deepest apologies." As Judge Coleman's final words echoed in the stunned silence, a single, distinct sound broke the stillness. It was the scraping of a wooden chair leg against the floor. In the back row, an elderly man, his back stooped with age but his shoulders squared with pride, slowly pushed himself to his feet. On his faded baseball cap were the words, "Vietnam Veteran." He didn't speak. He didn't applaud. He simply stood, his watery eyes fixed on Sergeant Vance in a gesture of profound, unspoken respect. His action was a spark in a room full of kindling. A moment later, another person stood. Then 2 more. Then a dozen. Within seconds, the entire gallery was on its feet. Lawyers in expensive suits, defendants in worn-out jeans, the court stenographer, even the young man who had been summoned for a skateboarding fine, they all stood. It wasn't a protest. It was a pilgrimage. They stood in silent, unified tribute to the quiet woman at the front of the room. It was a spontaneous salute from the heart of a nation, delivered in the most unlikely of places. Magistrate Evans, still standing at the side of the room, looked at the sea of standing citizens and finally, devastatingly, understood. He had not been presiding over a case of a parking violation, he had been presiding over a test of character, and he had failed spectacularly. The flush of anger on his face was replaced by the pale, cold sheen of shame. He lowered his head, unable to meet anyone's gaze. Sergeant Vance, for her part, remained as she had been from the start, poised, silent, her posture a perfect embodiment of discipline and dignity. She did not acknowledge the crowd's tribute. She did not need to. The honor they bestowed upon her was a reflection of her own, and it required no response. Judge Coleman signed the dismissal order with a firm stroke of his pen and handed it to Maria Flores. "It's done," he said quietly. As the crowd began to slowly, respectfully file out, a woman broke from the departing stream and approached Maya. She was plainly dressed, her face etched with the lines of worry and gratitude. It was the mother of the boy from the cemetery. "Excuse me, Sergeant," she said, her voice trembling as she clutched a small, folded piece of paper, the original citation she had come to contest on Maya's behalf after learning of the hearing. I was there. At Arlington. My son." Maya's expression softened with a flicker of recognition. "You saved his life," the woman whispered, tears now streaming down her cheeks. "The car, it would have. I didn't even get your name that day. I just saw the uniform and the bike. I came here to testify for you, to tell them what really happened." Maya looked at the woman, then at the dismissed ticket in her own hand. She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "That was my duty, ma'am." "I didn't know," the woman continued, gesturing toward the bronze cross on Maya's chest. "I didn't know what that meant. But I know now. And my son will know. I will tell him this story for the rest of my life." Maya met her gaze, and for the first time, a hint of warmth entered her voice. "That," she said softly, "is all the thanks I need." The automated doors of the Arlington County Courthouse hissed open, releasing Sergeant Maya Vance from its stale, recycled air back into the gray, damp reality of a Virginia afternoon. She paused for a moment on the top step, her cap held perfectly under her arm, the bronze cross on her chest seeming to catch what little light the overcast sky offered. A nondescript black government van pulled up to the curb, its engine a low hum. The side door slid open, revealing a young soldier, barely out of his teens, sitting ramrod straight inside. Private Miller, fresh from basic training, his face a mixture of awe and nervous energy. "Sergeant," he said, his voice a little too loud in the quiet van as Maya climbed in. They said you'd be out soon. Is everything all right?" Maya sat, placing her cap neatly on her lap. She looked out the window as the van pulled away, merging seamlessly into the midday traffic. "A quiet morning, Miller," she said simply. The young private nodded, unsure how to navigate the space around this living legend. Whispers about Sergeant Vance were part of the unofficial training for every new sentinel at the tomb. They knew about the medal, about the grenade, about the impossible story of survival. But no one ever spoke to her about it. It was an unwritten rule, born of a respect so deep it bordered on fear. As the van passed the iconic white gates of Arlington National Cemetery, Miller couldn't hold back his curiosity. Was it really just about a parking ticket, Sergeant?" Maya gave a faint nod, her eyes fixed on the endless rows of white headstones visible through the iron fence. "But, why didn't you just tell him?" Miller pressed, his youthful earnestness overriding his caution. "Why not just explain what happened?" A small crease formed between Maya's eyebrows, a sign not of annoyance, but of deep thought. She turned her head slightly, her gaze still distant. "Sometimes, Miller," she said slowly, her voice barely above a whisper, "explaining too much sounds like asking for credit. The act has to be enough." Miller fell silent, contemplating her words. He didn't fully understand, not yet. But he knew he had just been given a lesson far more valuable than anything he'd learned on a drill field. Back at Fort Myer, in the quiet, Spartan barracks reserved for the tomb sentinels, the air smelled of brass polish, shoe leather, and discipline. As Maya entered the changing room, a senior NCO looked up from his desk. "Vance," he said, his tone respectful but direct. You good? Yes, Sergeant Major. The older man held her gaze for a moment, then gave a short, satisfied nod. Good. You're on the 24-hour rotation starting at dawn. Maya nodded once and proceeded to her locker. With the same deliberate, meticulous care she used for everything, she began to remove her uniform jacket. Miller, who had followed her in, lingered nearby, watching. Sergeant, he began hesitantly as she hung the jacket, the bronze cross still pinned in its place of honor. That medal, it's not about being seen, is it? Maya paused. She looked at the young soldier, seeing in his earnest eyes the future of the tradition she embodied. No, Miller. It's not. Then, what is it about? Maya picked up her cap, her thumb brushing lightly over the polished brim. She looked past Miller, her gaze seeming to penetrate the walls of the barracks, settling on the sacred ground she had sworn to protect. It's about never forgetting, she said, her voice imbued with the weight of history, all the ones who didn't come back to wear one of their own. And with that, she turned and walked down the silent corridor, leaving Private Miller standing a little straighter, a little wiser, and forever changed. Would you have stood up in that courtroom? Do you believe honor and rules can coexist when one seems to defy the other? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. We ask that you please comment with the respect this story and our service members deserve. If this story reminded you why quiet dignity is the strongest voice, give it a like and make sure you're subscribed with the notification bell turned on. We bring you powerful stories like this every single day. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded what true honor looks like. More stories are waiting for you. Tap the one on your screen now, and we'll see you tomorrow.